p.m. I'd like to call the July 13th City Council meeting to order. Because of COVID-19 restrictions, our meeting tonight will be held virtually via Zoom. Public comments for the meeting were accepted in advance by mail or email. These comments will be read into the public record shortly. If you would like to submit any public comments for our next meeting, please visit our website at www.merriam.org and follow the directions listed there. As a reminder to the City Council, please be conscientious of others trying to speak. Speak slowly and clearly and state your name prior to speaking. If I need to confirm something that may have not been difficult to hear, I'll ask you for clarification. And the format for the council consideration on items tonight will be staff presentation, and I will open a time for council questions. Please hold questions until the end of the staff presentation. If you have a question when I ask for them, then please physically raise your hand so that I can see it on their video. And again, bear in mind, I can't see all of you at the same time, so I'll need a little help from time to time. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Mayor Sissom?
Here.
Councilmember DeVold?
Here.
Councilmember Hands?
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell?
Here.
Councilmember Knapp?
Here.
Councilmember Neal? Councilmember Pate? Councilmember Silvers?
Here.
Councilmember Yodridge?
Here.
Okay, earlier we get information that Mr. Neal would not be joining us this evening. Hopefully Mr. Pate will join at some point during the meeting. Public comments. Julie, would you please read any public comments that were submitted in advance for the record?
Okay, we have one public comment tonight, Mayor. It is from Al Frisbee, 10121 West 59th Terrace. Says, another city pool is not opening this summer. With COVID-19 virus cases increasing in close to 24 states, it is just a matter of time before Kansas cases and hospitalization of citizens also increases. We live on the border of Missouri. I cannot imagine people keeping social distancing in the outdoor pool and in the outdoor or indoor Merriam pools, or running on the track together, or participating in any other activity during the pandemic. People tend to need social contact. It is in their DNA. It shouldn't during the pandemic. Please reconsider opening the community center this year. That decision just might save lives, specifically when young asymptomatic kids/adults go visit their grandparents and parents after exposure in one of our pools. Life is too precious to gamble on our citizens becoming horribly sick or dying. Next year, we will have perhaps as many as 4 vaccines to protect us. Let's prepare for testing the pool by filling it with water just prior to opening next year. Please reconsider your position as guardians of our city. That was the only public comment submitted.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move from public items into consent agenda. Under the item listed under this heading, the issues are considered to be routine by the City Council, may be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion of these items unless the council member so requests, in which case that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. We have 3 items on the agenda this evening. Does any member wish to have any of the 3 items removed for separate consideration? Hey, Bob. Okay, I don't hear anybody that wants to do that. So I will accept a motion and a second for items on the consent agenda. Ms. Hands?
Yes, Hands here, and I move that the council approve consent agenda items 1 through 3.
And can I get a second? Scott?
This is Scott Diebold, and I second it.
Motion's made and seconded. Madam Clerk, please.
Councilmember Duval,
Aye.
Councilmember Hans,
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell,
Aye.
Councilmember Nath,
Aye.
Councilmember Pate,
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers,
Aye.
Councilmember Goodrich.
Aye.
Those three items pass. Okay, I've got a proclamation to read here somewhere if I can find it. Hold on a second. Not in my script.
It's also in your script, Mayor.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just have found it. Hold on. Resolution. Aha. I guess it is in the script. I was looking for this. I was right up here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, the month of July is designated as Parks and Recreation Month, and we have a proclamation to recognize our department. I will read it now. Whereas the Parks and Recreation programs are an integral part of communities throughout the country, including Merriam, and whereas our parks and recreations are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region. And whereas parks and recreations programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreational services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, and increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas parks and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife. And whereas our parks and recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the United States House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Merriam recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, now therefore I, Ken Sissom, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of Merriam, Kansas, do hereby proclaim July 2020 as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Merriam, proclaimed the 17th day of July 2020. I feel like there should have been music in the background or something. Anyway, obviously, this is an issue that hits very close to home because we have so many wonderful parks for the size of our city, and we just wouldn't be the same place without them. So we certainly have to take heart in everything that was in the proclamation. Okay, next item. Also want to take the chance to thank Anna and all her folks. You know, they're the one that make it all happen. I know, especially with all that's going on, they've had to work twice as hard trying to figure out how to exist and work and get ready and then hold off and reschedule. And I mean, I can only imagine the stress that all involves. So I want to thank all of them for that, for the job that they do, because those of us on the council, we don't feel that. And that's in part greatly because of the work that you guys do and city administration. Okay, let's move to council items. Finance administration, community center update.
Good evening. I'll share my screen now. All right, can you see the presentation?
Yep.
Great. So as I have been doing for a couple of years now, it is the first meeting of the month, so I'm here to give our monthly update, and this will be available on the website beginning tomorrow. I'm going to switch up the order a little bit and just give a quick update, which is the budget. So nothing here has changed. We continue to be on budget for this project. It looks like the way things are shaping up now, we will have the opportunity to return some contingency funding to the city, because even though we've experienced some COVID delays, we should still have some contingency left over at the end of this project. And as we begin to wrap up, we'll know more about what that amount will be in the next 2 months or so. Looking at the project schedule, we are finally in the heat of opening, which is really exciting. So the building is open this week for tours. It officially opens next week for the soft opening, and I'll take you through some more opening details on the next slide. We are still on schedule to complete the indoor pool around Labor Day. And then just a reminder that even though the indoor pool will be completed, our current plan is to not open either of the pools until we've hit phase out in the Ad Astra plan from the state of Kansas. Hopefully we will be in phase out by Labor Day, but you know, we're not sure based on how things are going. A more detailed look at what that updated opening schedule looks like. So as I mentioned, this week we are doing staff training in the building, and the facility is open for tours right now. We do have tours scheduled today, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I just got an update from Anna that today they had a tour every 10 minutes begin, which is how it works when you drop in. You just have to wait a couple of minutes, and every 10 minutes they'll take a group through the building. So that was really exciting and going well. We will do our flag lowering ceremony on July 19th, this Sunday, at 7 p.m. at IBFCC. And then on Monday morning at 9 a.m., we will do a flag raising ceremony to commemorate the official opening of the building. And that will kick off our soft opening week. And that says to charter members, but it's actually to all members next week. I'm sorry, I didn't update that from last time. July 25th is when the building opens to the public. And again, the outdoor pool will remain closed until phased out. September 5th, Labor Day weekend, our indoor pool is scheduled to be completed. And then, like I mentioned, whenever we hit phase out, those pools will open. This is a slide from last time when I talked about the impacts of COVID that we were dealing with. Of course, we still are in the midst of a public health crisis, and I'm going to take you through the safety and sanitation protocols that we have in place in a moment. We have fortunately been able to resolve most of our supply chain delays. The indoor pool tile has arrived, and we're really excited. It looks awesome in this space. So it's really putting that nice finishing touch on the indoor pool. So we have that under control. The fitness area has fans. Right now we're just waiting on the art projects to arrive, and that should happen in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll still have some various furniture pieces throughout the building that will be trickling in through the rest of summer, but all the main kind of significant pieces have arrived so far. And then, like we've talked about already, all of these combined required us to update our opening schedule last month. So a quick overview of the safety and sanitation protocols we'll have in the building once we open. So physical distancing will continue to be a big part of how we operate. Not only will there be a 6-foot physical distance enforced with floor markings when you're like checking into the building or in any space where we could be standing in line, but there will be designated spots inside any fitness classes that are offered. The high impact fitness classes will have a 10 to 12-foot buffer zone around the people in the class to provide some additional protection to those who attend. We'll also have plexiglass installed at the check-in counter. Masks will be required in the building while you're in movement. So what that means is when you are coming into the building and going to your, let's say, piece of fitness equipment, you have to have a mask on. Once you get on your piece of fitness equipment, you can take the mask off. Or if you're going to a class, the masks aren't required until you get into your spot in the fitness class. But once you are in that spot and ready for class to begin, you can take your mask off. And then the other thing that we'll implement are clean and dirty equipment designations. So this is as big as once you finish with your hand weight, you'll put it in a dirty pile to be cleaned by fitness center staff, all the way down to the pins that we use. There'll be a pile of clean pins and a pile of dirty pins. So we're going to really do our best to make sure that we're sanitizing everything that people are touching and being really cautious and safe for those who choose to come and work out with us right now. Membership discounts, this is just a reminder of what we talked about last month, where we have extended our charter memberships sale through Labor Day. So people who have purchased a membership, whether it's charter, an annual membership, or a monthly membership, will be able to access the building beginning July 20th, but their actual membership clock will not start until September 7th or whenever that indoor pool opens to the public. This summer, we're not doing summer-only memberships, and as a reminder, that day passes will only be available to Merriam residents through Labor Day. I think the only thing I'll note here is this is the plan as it stands today. Once we continue, or as we continue to move through this COVID situation, it may warrant additional discussion as we learn more. But as of this month, this is how things stand and what we're moving forward and communicating to our residents and to future members. So with all of that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Any questions?
No,
I have a question.
Whitney? We'll start with Whitney and then Jason.
Meredith, just about the flag lowering and the flag raising ceremonies. Are those open to the public? What kind of safety precautions are we having in place at the ceremonies themselves?
Yeah,
a little more.
Sure. Those are, they are not close to the public, but they're not something that we are widely publicizing. It's really supposed to just be a commemorative photo opportunity for the city council and to just mark the occasion. Masks will be required at those. We're going to do our best to distance 6 feet, but of course for a photo we may need to get a little bit closer. So that we'll rely on everybody to determine their comfort level with being a part of that photo. We'll try to get a wide enough shot so that we can appropriately respond to this situation. But yeah, they're really just meant to commemorate the occasion. We'll have a Boy Scout group from Merriam who's coming in to conduct the flag lowering and flag raising ceremonies for us. And we'll have, little individually wrapped snacks in the morning. So we're trying to, do the best that we can based on what we're dealing with right now. But it's really just more of a commemorative occasion. Once everything is done in September, that's when we'll have the grand opening event. So that will be the big celebration that we'll put on, and we'll, throw the doors open to the public and hopefully be able to throw a big party at that point. And I'll send out a follow-up email tomorrow with the details of those 2 events. And we hope everybody will be able to join us.
Jason, do you have a question?
Yes, this is Jason Silvers. I do want to just put out there that I do feel somewhat reluctant about having classes during this time, even though people are going to be spaced out in a closed room with people breathing heavy. Me being a runner, I understand how much I'm a mouth breather when I run. I put out a lot of air and particulates, I'm sure. But that wasn't actually why I raised my hand. I raised my hand because I was just wondering if maybe someone could give me and the public a little bit more detail on City Hall and when it's open, because I did stop by last Friday to pay, or I wanted to pay a charter membership charter membership scholarship to counterbalance the one I'm getting. And when I showed up, someone from the public showed up right before me, and neither of us could get in. So I didn't know if it was a call ahead or what.
No, City Hall is open from 8 to 4:30 every day. Actually last Friday, no wait, that's not the 3rd. Were you here on the 3rd?
It might have been the 3rd, yeah.
Yeah, so the 3rd we were closed to the public for the holiday weekend, and there should have been a sign on the door indicating that, but generally we're open from 8 to 4:30.
Okay. I didn't make it all the way up to the door because she couldn't get in and turned around and told me it was locked. So
If it was the 3rd, that's why, but typically we're here.
thank you for clarifying.
Christine, did you have your hand up? I think it.
I did. I'm not sure if we've already received this information, but so how many memberships have we managed to get in place?
I'm not sure of that number. Anna, do you have those details off the top of your head?
I do not have those details off the top of my head, but if you give me a few minutes, I can pull those up rather quickly. I just need to run a report. It hasn't been top of mind yet, so I will look that up and I'll get that to you here in a few minutes.
Anybody else have any questions?
No. I will also note that Anna is in her new office. You can see that new backdrop.
Yeah. Bob, do you have a question?
Yeah, Mayor, this is Bob Pape. I was just curious as to any of the events that we're having when people don't show up with masks. Do we have a supply of masks to give somebody that just didn't have one?
Yeah, so we have masks available, disposable masks available at all of our facilities for the public if they come in, and we're strongly encouraging them to wear them when they're in the building.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay. Anna, you found it yet?
We'll get
No,
first.
I was just taking my video off because I'm going to make some funny faces and I didn't really want that on screen.
I'll tell you what, we'll move to CIP update, and then you can let us know towards the end of that. Unless anybody has any other questions about the community center update. Anybody? Okay, let's move to CIP update. Mr. McDonald.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have the July CIP update for you. Our 2020 cars and storm drainage improvements for Johnson and Maston Street. Kansas Heavy Construction has one remaining storm drain structure to replace on Maston. We ran into a fiber utility conflict, and they're in the process of moving that to allow us to put that section in. All curbs and sidewalks and the 8A ramps have been replaced with the exception of that one section over there on Maston. And we anticipate the mill and overlay for that project along with 65th Street to start July 28th. And we're still on schedule for the August 5th deadline for Maston Street. Kansas Heavy's also started moving and replacing curbs and sidewalks and driveway approaches on Johnson Drive, just east of Antioch. They're working east to the city limits, then they will be heading back west towards Antioch. I have one new project on there, which is 55th Street storm drainage. Staff became aware of approximately 355 feet of deteriorated corrugated metal pipe on 55th Street. Just east of Schweitzer, that's in need of repair replacement. We are currently advertising for bids, and our bids are scheduled to open July 21st. All I have, and I'm free to answer any questions you may have on these projects.
Anybody have a question? Mr. Silvers.
It's actually more of a comment. I've been seeing a lot of work being done. I'm not sure what road it's on. I wanted to say England, but I think that's wrong. All the new lampposts that are going on up, and that looks great. I'm really excited about that. I feel very fortunate to live in a city that even during crazy times like this, we still have the budget to do projects that we've already budgeted for. So kudos to the city. And without naming names, I found out I work with, actually my boss started off in the Public Works Department in Merriam back when Jim was a little baby. He's told me to tell Jim hi, and I'll send you an email or something to give you his name. But he said you were a great guy, and he was really excited that you have been promoted to the position you're in.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, Bob, there you go.
Yeah, Mayor, I was just going to try to catch Jim before he left. It's not related to the CIP, but I was just curious, are we still online for the large limb, or for the limb pickup, excuse me, not large item, but limb pickup here in July?
Yes, we are. It's the, yeah, the third full week of July is when we're going to be out picking up limbs. Nothing has changed on that. So.
Okay, good. I just wanted to verify that. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Okay. All right. Mr. Engel, do we have any staff items this evening?
Just two quick items, Mayor. First one, just a reminder that we'll have a budget work session next Monday. That'll be at 6:30 as opposed to 7 o'clock normal time. And that'll be via Zoom. We will send out an address when we've created one. And then to just remind the council that last week we did receive 9 bids for the 5701 demo. And that all but one of them were within the budget, the projected budget that's in 2020. So staff's going to do some due diligence on a couple of those and do some follow-up with them. And then we'll return to council soon with a recommendation and seek out next steps. So just wanted to make sure that the public and council was aware of that. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Caldwell, your mic's off. Your microphone's off, Bruce. Very
Okay.
good.
We'll try this again. Has anybody had any rumblings throughout the community about demolition of the old community center?
No.
Is that a topic of conversation anywhere? I have not.
What's our Mr. Engel? What's our update on the next step?
Well, the next step would be to ensure that we believe that expenditure can be made in 2020. Make sure that the low bid or the second to low bid are fully have an understanding of the scope of the work, vet them, and then to come back, make a recommendation to council to move forward or seek next steps from council.
And is that scheduled for 2 weeks from today, or do we know?
Assuming that all the information that we need to get, we can get in the next 2 weeks. Yes, I would anticipate it coming forward on the 27th.
Okay.
Unless told differently.
Right. Well, we'll look at the agenda, but I presume there'll be room for something like that. I don't know yet. All right. Do we have any new business? Anybody?
Mayor, I think Anna has the numbers.
Okay. Very good. I was stalling as long as I could.
Okay.
I was trying really hard. I wanted to make sure I gave you a full picture of memberships. So we have that online form that people start with, and we've had 238 requests come through that online form. Prior to this evening, I just got a text as an update. We have sold 126 memberships, and 11 Silver Sneakers have enrolled in that program as well. So for a total of 137 memberships. And I just received an update from staff that they have just processed 2 memberships tonight. So you can take that 126 up to 128. And we had 53 people at 10 tours tonight.
Oh.
So we see that number going up. And just as another update, I'm working with Ryan on 2 more additional insurance membership opportunities for people that do not do Silver Sneakers, but maybe have other insurance opportunities for memberships. So we hope to have one of those before you at the next meeting.
Very good. Very good. Well, there's no new business, no more staff items, and as you all know, we have a work session. We're going to move straight into that after I officially adjourn. There's no executive session, so I'll accept a motion and a second to adjourn. Bob?
Let me unmute. I'll make a motion, Mayor, that we adjourn.
And Chris?
Hands here, and I second.
Okay, motion made and second. Madam Clerk?
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
All right. Okay. All right. You want to take us into our work session?
I'll go ahead and kick off here while Donna starts to get her notes together. This would normally be the time for those new council members that we have. This would be the time where we would start handing out cookies and letting everyone start to kind of get settled in, and where we start to throw information at them. Unfortunately, we're doing things a little bit different this year, as I'm sure you're all aware. I do want to thank everyone for your patience with us over the 2021 budget process. Clearly, this year has been a little different than years past. That's not to say that we didn't start the budget in March or April. It's just that this year we were doing it at home under lockdown orders, and the pandemic was grinding the economy to a halt. So I do appreciate, again, the fact that the council has been very patient with us, and we think that it's important that we were able, we really appreciate and believe that it's important to wait as long as we could, simply so that we could get a clearer crystal ball of what we think the end of 2020 and what the projected beginning of 2021 is going to look like, and how COVID is going to impact that. Just like our personal budgets, we don't start on the first of the year with no money and end on the last day of the year with no money. We have money that carries over from year to year. And so I think it's pretty doggone important for us to have a good idea of where we're at, and they got me with my cheaters on here, where we're at, and where we think we're going to begin 2020. So we're going to do this really in two parts, or at least we're projecting to do it in two parts. Tonight we're going to talk about 2020. Clearly that is an important part of the 2021 budget. We're always building a budget 18 months, approximately 18 months in advance. So we are always kind of projecting and guessing how we think the current year is going to end, how the next year is going to begin. Clearly we have policies that affect how much money we have to keep in reserve. So that's why that's important. So tonight we're going to talk about 2020. We're going to Donna's going to give you a little bit of a budgeting 101, talk about some fund accounting, mill levies, revenue sources, and exciting things like that. And then where we, again, project to end 20 and start 21. Last, I'll give you a little sneak of the greatest hits of 21, just to not keep you waiting, for the next week, wondering how 21 looks. I think you'll be pleased with that. I know we're very pleased. But tonight we're just going to cover 2020. Before we jump into 2021 next week. So again, some kind of educational pieces, some budgeting 101. I will let Donna dictate how she thinks best. If you have questions of her as we go through this, save them to the end or interrupt. I don't know if she'll be able to see or hear you simply because she's sharing her screen. But we do want to make sure that everybody is comfortable with where we believe we're going to end this year with, and fundamentally how budgeting at the municipal level works if it's something that you've not been exposed to. And if this is not enough time or not the right venue to do that, we are always available to do one-on-one meetings or calls with any council members or members of the public to make sure that you've got an understanding of where we're at. We believe that we can justify and defend all of the things that we come up with, project, and what we recommend. So please don't hesitate to reach out and ask us if you need more information than we're providing. Because again, I acknowledge this is a very tight timeline we're doing for the budget, but we just think that it was prudent because unfortunately we don't get our numbers until 3 months behind. So we still don't know what April or May, or I'm sorry, we don't know what May or June looks like, and we won't. We'll approve a budget before we know what they do. But we think that we've done a lot of good due diligence and a lot of good research. Donna's actually been out and drove and visited with retailers in our community to kind of see what their sales look like. So we think that we've done a pretty doggone good job of putting our thumb on where we think we're going to end the year at. So that being said, I'm going to give it over to Donna and let her jump into some budgeting 101 and where we are in 20.
Hey, Chris, it's Ryan Dink. Did you want me to stick around?
That is up to you. If you want to know about our budget, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, I guess to kind of answer the first question, I have no problems at any point in the meeting, if you unmute yourself and just jump in and ask a question, sometimes I think that's easier to answer the questions as we go along instead of waiting until the end. One thing that I always like to do when I do budget presentations is kind of give a little bit of a, much like Chris said, kind of a budget 101, or how governmental accounting can kind of relate to you, because for some unknown reason, a lot of people think governmental accounting is confusing and difficult. And so I want to make it to where you understand this, because then you'll be making informed decisions. So you'll see up here that I have funds available for 2021 budget. Really, this chart works somewhat like if you were doing your budgeting at home. And if we kind of think about it that way. If you were considering buying, let's say, a large boat in 2021, there are some items that you might want to consider if you were going to ask yourself, can I afford to do this? One of the things that you might look at is, how much money do I have in my savings and checking now, less any bills that I've got? Well, that's kind of your your January 1, 2020 fund balance. Think of fund balance as somewhat your savings and checking. Then you're going to think about, okay, well, I probably ought to consider all the wages that I'm going to earn in 2020. So any kind of earnings are your 2022 revenues, and maybe you want that boat so much that you're even thinking about cashing in part of your 401k. So that could kind of be your transfer in. Expenditures are what they sound like. It's what kind of bills am I going to have to pay? My mortgage, my whatever. So then you have where you're going to end the year at. Wherever you end the year is where you're going to start. You probably have a minimum amount of money that you think you need to keep in your savings. And whatever that is, you know next year you don't want to spend beyond that point. So we'll just subtract that out. That's your minimum fund balance. Whatever you think you're going to make next year. And so then you ultimately come up with, how much can I afford to spend on the boat next year? Hopefully that made a little bit of sense. What we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to go down to the December 31st, 2020 fund balance. So we're going to kind of get through what we think is going to happen this year. And certainly this year has been more challenging than a lot of years. I'm new, and then also we have this COVID thing, but hopefully I can kind of impart a little bit of how we did that. Okay, as I said just before, this minimum fund balance. So what does that mean for us? Well, our fund balance is actually, our minimum fund balance is based on our general fund and our risk management fund. You have to take their fund balances together to see if we're meeting our target. Our policy says that those two should be equal or greater than 30% of general fund revenue. And whenever you're setting your policy, and I'm sure when Merriam set these, you thought about things like that, but you're gonna set it to kind of mitigate shortfalls in revenues or cover unexpected expenditures. And boy, has this year really been kind of the year to show how important it is to have a fund balance to mitigate shortfalls in revenue. Obviously, if Merriam had not been conservative and had these funds available, we would be having a whole different conversation. It helps provide stability in your taxes, and whenever you're doing it, you want to talk about sensitivity of revenues out there. And since we have a lot of sales tax, that's a consideration for us. So again, our goal is 30%. And as we go through this, we'll look at where we are with that goal. Okay, when we started out the year, we had almost 7 million in general fund and risk management fund balance, which equated to 47%. So we didn't just exceed it, we had a healthy amount above, which again is absolutely great because we've got these extra funds now where we can weather the COVID storm. We'll see that the next slide, or the next line, is revenues and transfers in, and kind of just to talk about how budgeting goes and transfers go. I can have a couple little graphs here. Okay, the reason that we have transfers are because the way fund accounting, governmental accounting works is we put all the revenues that can be used for any public purpose into the general fund. So property tax, license, all of it goes in there. The majority of Merriam's revenues are discretionary. We can spend them on any public purpose. And once we've gathered them in the general fund, we can transfer those revenues to other funds if we want to set them aside for a specific purpose. And the non-discretionary revenues are placed in funds to track. Okay, that's a lot of words. Let's just look at the graphic. I think it's a little more understandable. So we have here all our, I'm sorry, I talk with my hands and I'm catching myself doing that now. But anyway, all our discretionary revenue is going into the general fund. We have our street and stormwater sales taxes going into the capital improvement fund. We have our debt service property tax, our recreation facility sales taxes going in the debt service fund. Right now, there's not any revenue going into the equipment reserve fund because there's not a dedicated revenue source for it. So as we're going along and we're thinking about how we're going to divvy up this general fund pool of money, I would think one of the first things you would want to do is say, okay, are there any obligations out there that we have to do? So we might go first to the debt service fund and say, okay, we had this much in principal and interest. We've got this debt service property tax and this recreation facility sales tax that are going to pay it. Is there any other amount that we need to be able to fund to cover all of that? If there is, then we're going to actually take a revenue stream down to the debt service fund. After you've done that, then really it's kind of up to you to decide what your priorities are. The general fund can fund things like the city departments, public safety, public works, parks. You can make transfers down to the equipment reserve fund if you as a council feel that funding and setting aside funds for major equipment is important so that you don't have to pay for a fire truck out of one budget. Or you could transfer money over to your capital improvement fund because we have a street and stormwater sales tax, but what if you want to make improvements at a park? Then it would be or to something that wouldn't qualify for that sales tax. So as we go through the budget next week, and we're looking at all the requests that you're going to see, really, these are the decisions that are being made, where you want this general fund revenue to ultimately wind up. So with that being said, let's just jump back to revenues and let's look at where 2020, where we think we're going to be. This was our general fund revenue composition in 2019. We had about 28% from property tax, franchise fees, and we have our sales tax over here and other. The color coding on this really goes back to, are these revenues sensitive to the economy or not as sensitive? And you'll see sales tax in red can be very sensitive to the economy. Property tax is really on the other end of the pendulum and not as much. And then the other is somewhere in between. And so I think we have a really nice blend of revenue in that we definitely have the property tax and franchise fees of 35% to help us in years like this year when we're a little more uncertain on what the economy is going to do. On the flip side, most people don't want to pay property tax and franchise fees. Those are more unpopular. In your sales tax, you've got that to where you're funding the majority of your general fund from those items instead of property tax. So I think it's a good balance. So if we look at where we're kind of thinking the general fund revenue will be for this year, not surprising, property tax, we're really only seeing a very slight, forecasting a slight decrease, and that is actually based on a few properties that appealed their assessment and they've been awarded a lower amount of assessed value. So it really isn't related to people aren't paying. So that's pretty slight. Then we get down to our city sales and use tax, and you can see 32.4% decline. Obviously, that's a lot more impactful. When we get all the way down to the bottom, you can see that overall, we are looking at about a $3.9 million shortfall. Now, this is a very conservative forecast, and I think there is reason to hope that as we go through the year that things will wind up being a little brighter than this, but that's where it is right now, where we're thinking right now. So I'm going to go through and talk a little bit more about property tax and sales tax. I don't know if there are any questions specifically about any of these other revenues asked, and if not, I'll just continue going through it. Okay, property tax. Okay, property tax is, there are two components to it. One is residential and one is commercial. You can see that our residential is about 12% of our general fund revenue and commercial is 16%. The way property tax kind of works, you have your market value of your house. And that market value, your appraiser comes through and decides what that is. And based on that, they calculate your assessed property value. In Kansas, residential property is assessed at 11.5% of market value. And then a mill rate is set, and that's the rate that you're going to be taxed at. And this rate for every $1,000 of assessed value is what you're going to pay. Our current mill rate is 27.765. Ultimately, property tax is the amount generated. So it's going to equal your mill rate times your assessed property value divided by 1,000 is going to equal your property tax. So I commented that your mill is 27.765 just for the city of Merriam. So how much revenue does 1 mill generate for the city? We can see for every mill that you levy, it's about 205,000. Going directly to how are your taxes calculated, if you have a $200,000 home, it's going to have an assessed value of about 23,000. We have a mill rate of 27.765. So your annual property tax is going to wind up being about $639. That equates to about $1.75 a day. Now, how does Merriam equate to everyone else's? You can see we're 8 for the total rate here on this chart within Johnson County cities. Okay, you're probably paying more than the amount that we just showed for property tax. Your bill is probably significantly more than just that. And that's because we were just talking about what you pay to the city of Merriam. In addition, on your property tax bill, you're paying Shawnee Mission Schools, the community college, Johnson County, the state of Kansas. And so Merriam only equates to about 24% of what you're paying. What is our total mill rate with the school district and the state and the county all included? It's 116.537, which actually lowers us to number 5 on mill levy tax rates. Okay, just a little discussion on sales tax then. Okay, this actually kind of breaks out sales tax now a little bit more, and you can see from this that sales tax in all make up about 56% of our general fund revenue. Specifically from automobile sales, it totals about 35% of our revenue. And so how automobiles sell is kind of makes or breaks us. As Chris said, I went and talked to a couple of different car dealerships today and kind of generally talked to them and was really, I guess, felt it was good conversation and felt that they were very optimistic that this year was not going to be down as much as maybe what we projected. And so that gives me hope that maybe this year will actually turn around. So when we look at sales tax collections for March and April, which April is the last month we have data for, we can see that we compare March and April of this year to last year, we can see automobile sales were down 36.4%. All the other city sales were down 25%. Use tax was up by 37%, and at least some of use tax comes from you get Amazon delivered to your house, etc. So I think that's maybe kind of telling of more of us stayed home and had it delivered in. And then the county sales tax are down, but not as much as what our city sales taxes was down. And so that kind of helped offset some of that. So in total, we're down 25% for the year. So, or that's how we were, I'm sorry, for April and March. For the year, these are kind of where we think the numbers will end up. And in total right now, we're forecasting about 32% down. So if we go back to the general fund revenue snapshot again, significant decreases in sales tax, not as much in property tax, overall about a 21% decrease. If we put that into our chart here, we have our 14.6 million. Our expenditures and our transfers out, well, if you're kind of looking at a $3 million reduction in revenues, I think what's prudent for you to take a look at is how can we reduce expenditures, and then what is it ultimately going to do to our fund balance. As soon as COVID became an issue, Chris really talked to staff about, are there expenditures that we can either not make or push off until next year? And there was 730,000 just identified fairly readily. There have been other things identified, as in we have delayed some of the hiring, and we've had all department heads really take a look at, before you spend it, think about whether or not this is something that has to be had. So we certainly tried to reduce that. Right now, we're forecasting, whenever we look at expenditures and transfers, we're looking at about a 2.5, being about 2.5 million under the budget. And when we put that forecast number of 17.6 million in there, then we come down to an ending fund balance this year of about 5.7 million, which is 39% of revenue. And so we're definitely using up a chunk of fund balance, but again, I think that's why that's there, and we're still going to start next year. We should start it with a healthy fund balance. And so that's generally where we think we're going to be. Are there any questions or comments?
I think well, anybody's trying to come up with some questions. I think it's important to summarize this in that our recommendation of how we're going to end 20 is to spend down what we clearly have known for a while to be hefty fund balances, along with some spending reductions. So this is not just spending our savings. There's going to be over $1 million worth of expenditures that we are delaying, or just we're not going to do. Was just things that, I mean, we can't make up travel and training. There's some things that just won't get, they won't get done in 2020, and they'll get pushed to 2021. But I think it's important to point out that the starting fund balance in 2021 with that spending plan is still almost 10% over what our policy is for reserves. So again, I think that's good news. That is the reason that we, for years, have continued to add to that fund balance, because we're so reliant on sales tax, and not just sales tax, but really one particular sector within the sales tax field. So I think that we're able to start the 2021 budget in a pretty good place. With the hopes that over the next couple of years we can build our fund balances back up. But again, we are well above, we're almost 10% over what our policy is, that we should keep 30%. So I feel pretty good about that. And I think Donna did a good job of pointing out that our estimates, they're conservative. I mean, I've shared with council that we were projecting 80% decreases in sales tax. And so when they come in at 30%, it's almost like a revenue stream that got created, because there's an additional 50% of revenue that's going to be left over at the end of the year. That is how we are choosing to budget the rest of the year. We are very conservative in what we believe our revenue estimates are. But that's, I think, what we should be doing. We don't want to get to the point where we don't want to overshoot the mark too bad, but we sure don't want to undershoot it. And end up having a budget that you know, we can't sustain services that we have to cut, things like that. And again, that's why we have a policy to have 30% of operating revenue, which is pretty good. So if there's no questions about the information that you've been shared, I'm going to just kind of cover one last slide, or maybe two last slides.
I do have a question. I've been raising my hand. I don't know who's supposed to answer that.
Yeah.
So this is Chris Hands, and I just want you to talk a little bit more about who all you talk to, not just our businesses. I'm assuming you reached out to other financial directors, because we've been seeing also good news in the Shawnee Mission Post about what's happening at the county level and all of that. Just tell us more about who you talk to, Donna.
We have the Eastern Kansas Government Finance Officers Association have certainly had conversations among ourselves about what are you predicting for this? What are your sales tax numbers looking like? And and in general, everyone is seeing numbers 20% down, 20% or so. We are hit a little bit more than our non-automobile kind of line up with that, but the auto sales really kind of pulled us down, at least in March and April. I can tell you the conversations that I had with the dealerships today, just to expand briefly on it, was that they really had a bad April, but starting around May 15th, they saw just kind of the floodgates open up, and that they're not really at this point necessarily predicting a decrease for the rest of the year. They think, especially with used cars, they think that they'll break pretty much even with sales from last year. New car sales, there is concern about whether or not there's enough supply to meet the demand. And so I was kind of told, you know, we might see about a 20% decrease on that, because there may just not be enough cars for people to buy. So that's primarily where I focused. But again, all of the finance directors have certainly been emailing each other back and forth, and it seems like we're generally seeing a trend of somewhere 15-20%, depending on if you have a lot of restaurants, or you know what your retail sector looks like.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Brian has a question.
Yes, this is probably more for Mr. Engel. The $116 million that the county has from the CARES Act, do you know the timetable on when they're going to decide on who gets some of that money?
I do not know the time. I'm not muted. Yeah, I do not know the timetable. There has been a group that was put together to help provide some guidance from the city level. Last week, the League of Kansas Municipalities put together a resolution for some of the smaller cities throughout Kansas to approve at the council level and then provide back to the state, because again, the smaller cities are being funded. The CARES funding is coming directly through the state. There was a conversation last week with all the managers in the county about, is that something that we need to do in Johnson County? Because Johnson County, because of its size, similar to Sedgwick County, was a directly funded county. So they have decided that we don't need to do that. At least the county has not said that they want us to do that, but we're working on getting a resolution. We're trying to line up all of our ducks so that when the county finally decides, here's what we need to do, here's what's reimbursable, you know, we can pull the trigger on it. So we're getting close, but I can't give you any sort of date. Conversations are ongoing, but we have till December 31st to spend it. So I mean, it's clearly, we also know that we need to start distributing these funds.
Okay, thank you.
Just as an add-on, there's also different funding sources. I think through Kansas Department of Homeland Security or Kansas Department KDHE maybe. I'm trying to think what it is. I'm sorry, through FEMA, through the state. There's funding that's available for certain things that you can do through there. So but those are matches. So one of the things that, this is just another aside, one of the other things that we're having conversations about at the city and county level is the CARES funding, we believe, is going to be just 100%. If I spent $1 and it's qualifiable, you'll give me $1. Some of the things that you can put in for reimbursement from the state are a match, meaning like it's an 80-20 match or 75-25 match. And so what we're trying to figure out is, could we do those and then have the CARES funding pay for the 25% match that would be the local match? So we're trying to, and that's going to be a statutory thing. That's going to be, there's legal opinions that are going to need to weigh in on it. So there's a couple different things that are outside of the county's control. So it's not just them not making the decision. We are actually trying to make sure that if we do this, when we do this right. So we don't get the money, reimburse ourselves, spend it on something, put it in our budgets, whatever it is, and then realize, uh-oh, we did this wrong. We need to give the money back to the county so the county can give the money back to the Fed. So we just want to make sure that we're thoughtful and that we do it right. So it is taking a little bit of time, but that we do have some pretty smart people thinking about it.
Okay.
And go to this next slide then.
So here is this is our preview of next year, or actually next week, but it's next year's recommended budget. So just as a highlight, just to keep everyone from fretting all week, or just to kind of give everybody kind of whet their appetites, we will go into 21 budget in great detail, but just as a preview, we're going to submit a budget that has no increase to the property tax mill levy. It's got 3% salary increase in it. No new employee request, and then we're going to have some funding provided for council member communication stipend. That is something that we've talked about in the past, about the level of communication that council puts forth to communicate with their constituents. We've polled some of our neighboring communities, and many of them have communication stipends, so it's a modest amount, but we're going to suggest that go in there. City Council Chambers video meeting project, we've got a little spoiled having all these meetings on video, and that's another topic we've talked about for several years, but we think it's time to be able to videotape our meetings when we're actually can meet in City Hall. So we've got that in the recommended budget, as well as some polling survey software funding. One of the things that came out of our retreat in the spring was the need for a strategic planning conversation, larger strategic planning process. So we've put money in the budget for that. One of our sustainability initiatives in our goals and objectives was to take a look at some electric vehicle charging stations. We have done that research. We have identified a way forward that we can put some EV charging stations in our community. So we've added some of that money to the budget. Next year is also our 3-year cycle is up for our ETC citywide survey that goes out to I think it's about 1,500 homes. I probably have that number wrong. Maybe it's 1,500 we get in return, but every 3 years we send out that citywide survey to kind of gauge where we're at, where we're going. And we do get the last page of that if we wanted to customize some of those questions, but generally the other ones are about our service delivery and value of tax dollars. And if you'll recall, the last one we did, we were off the chart. So I'm already going to prep you to say that there's no way we could be better than we were last time, but that's going to be in the recommended 21 budget. And then we've got a couple additional grant opportunities. We've expanded the grant program that has been very successful, the various grants that we've offered over the course of the last several years. So we think we have a couple new additions to that suite of offerings that we're pretty excited about. So not only in 21 are we not proposing to increase the property tax mill, but we're going to take care of our employees. which is a council goal. We're not going to increase employees. At least we're not putting that in the budget. We don't anticipate doing that. And we're going to broaden the circle of opportunity for a lot of our residents to be plugged into what we're doing, and widen the circle of opportunity for people to be plugged into some of the enhanced services that we offer here in Merriam that a lot of other communities are just unable to do. So I think we're pretty proud of the budget. I think we've done a good job. The department heads have really sharpened their pencils, as we've kind of vacillated between it's going to be the end of the world and everything's going to be okay, and maybe it's somewhere in between okay and the end of the world. We've really leaned up the budget, and as we get a little more comfortable with what we believe 20 is going to look like, that's how we can put some of these things in the budget and feel like we can add services. We can do better than we have done in the past because we've leaned up in some of these areas. And there will be some things from 20 that did get pushed off to the 21 budget. I mean, there's some things we still have to replace police cars. So just because we're not replacing them in 20 doesn't mean we're not going to replace them at all. We're pushing some of those things down the road. So you'll see some familiar things in the 21 budget that were supposed to happen in 20, and then you'll see some of these new things. But again, I think it's a pretty exciting budget. I think it hits a lot of the high notes of our goals and objectives, which is a great document that provides department heads and staff, the direction we need to know what we think the council would like to see. So I'm happy to answer. Well, I'm happy to answer any high-level questions about this. We will get into the details next week. I can't see anybody, so I'll assume if nobody speaks up. Okay, let's speak in the next week.
Bob has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious as I'm trying to think through this. It looks great of all things that we're still going to be able to do, but I was wondering if we're 30+%, 33% or whatever that figure was down this year, where do you think that recovery is going to be able to do all these things and next year? I guess I'm not seeing the math.
Well, what we're doing is we're spending down fund balance. So we believe that the revenues and the expenditures, we believe that the money we will make next year will match the amount of money that we are proposing to spend. What we are down, we're essentially balancing the books by spending some less stuff this year and just spending out of our fund balance. So we are spending this year. We will spend more money than we brought in. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So we are spending out of our fund balance. So we are containing the COVID impact in our fund balances in 20. But because the fund balances were so high, we can bring them down and still start the year at almost 10% over, at almost 40% of budgeted reserves, which the policy is 30, that's a pretty prudent policy. We've just kept really, really high fund balances. A lot of them, and other cities do. Other cities just don't keep them generally as high as we have in the past. But we've done that simply because we've always looked at the great fortune we've had with our automobile dealerships as a blessing and a potential curse. I mean, if we have like 20 years ago and gas goes to $5 a gallon, or situs changes, we're going to have to adjust, and having those fund balances allows us some time to adjust. So what we're using those fund balances to balance the 20 budget so that we can present a 21 balanced budget. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I realize that our deficit this year is going to be eating into our fund balances, but your budget you're going to be proposing to us is not indicative of, you're not going to try to decrease that from 39% fund balance to take another 9% or something off.
No, not at all. We are going to present a budget that what we believe the revenues are is we are not going to spend more than we plan on bringing in next year.
Awesome.
Or at least we're not going to do that without giving you the option to do so. So yeah, we are not going to present you with a budget that brings in $20 and spends 21.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think
that was my question. I didn't know if we were going to try to reduce fund balance again next year in 21 or not, additional.
We're not going to try to. And I think one of the other things that to keep in mind is that because of the conservative nature of our revenue estimates, it's quite likely, to be quite honest with you, that we're going to end up with more money on 12/31 than we're guessing right now. I mean, we're still assuming rainy days ahead. And clearly it's not going to go back to sunshine. I mean, but we are being very, very conservative in how much money we believe we're going to bring in for the rest of the year. So, but we have to have, we have to have a number. We have to be able to justify the number we're at. We're just assuming, again, that we're really going to be down in sales tax.
I say that, I mean,
Thank you.
we aren't making nearly as conservative of, well, I still think they're conservative revenue estimates for next year, but they're not down 3 million like we're projecting for this year. They're a lot closer to 2019 revenue. And so if as we get closer to the end of the year, if COVID has hit us a lot harder than what we're thinking, or it looks like we're still in that period, it could be that in November, December, we come to you and say, okay, we know we adopted this budget, but now we're going to need to amend it and take some of these things out. But right now, we feel that there's reason to be optimistic that we won't be nearly as far down in our revenues next year as projecting for this year.
I can't see anyone, so if we'll go to the next slide.
Actually, this is Jason Silvers. I had my hand raised. Just out of curiosity, is our general fund in an interest-bearing account, and does carrying any of this money over into 2021, does that benefit us at all?
I'll let Donna go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes, it is interest-bearing. We have all of our money invested in some form, state law, really, and just being prudent managers of city funds really dictate that we're limited in what we can invest in. But we invest in things like U.S. Treasury bills, U.S. agencies, money market accounts, things that are generally fully backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. In your monthly financial report that you get each month, there is actually a section about halfway through it that lists all of the investments that the city has. And so we get around $100,000 a year in investment revenue in the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And to go to the next slide. And
Okay, so to wrap it up, this is our budget calendar. So tonight, July 13th, was our 2020 general fund projections. Next week, we will jump into our 2021 budget proposal. So this would be the recommended budget for 2021 that I just shared the highlights. We do have one extra meeting on the 27th. If we need to have another budget conversation, or you hear something next week that we need to tweak or adjust, we will notice for a public hearing, which is a statutory requirement, on the 4th, so that the public hearing we can hold on the 20th for the council to consider a resolution to adopt the budget, because on August 25th, we have to have the budget certified to the county clerk. So we will likely not by the 20th, but likely by the 27th, we will have the next month's worth of revenues. So we would be able to tweak the budget a little bit more, hopefully in the upward direction, because we'd have some additional sales tax numbers. And again, if you would like to spend some additional time on the budget after we present it to you on next Monday, we're happy to share that share that time with you. Have you come in, or we can whatever it takes for you to get comfortable with the budget, we're willing to do. Again, we absolutely want to accommodate the fact that we're doing this on a very accelerated timeline. But we think that we're going to be able to cover all the highlights next week. Again, that's why we're starting at 6:30. Please remember, it's at 6:30. We want to make sure we get everybody together in case we need to go late into the night. I don't think we do. I think we can, do this in a pretty succinct way. But we will be on the line at 6:30 next week to go over the 2021 budget. That being said, Donna or I or anybody else that's on the line, happy to answer any questions.
Chris, can you describe how a public hearing would actually look? How are the public going to be able to have input directly during a hearing under the circumstance we find ourselves in?
Sure. So if we did it like we did the CDBG hearing, we would do it similar to public comment. So we would put the notice out. The notice, essentially what we post each year when we post the budget is not the full budget book. It's really a one-sheet budget form. That's the state required budget form. So we would put that out, and if anybody had any questions about anything they heard, we would give them the opportunity. We would just request that they put that notice in by 6:30 or 7 o'clock prior to the meeting. Because it's a public hearing, it's very similar to public comment. It's not necessarily a conversation. It's that people need the opportunity to share their thoughts and opinions and things about the budget. So we would just, that's currently how we would propose doing it. The council would like it done a different way. We can investigate that also.
I was just curious. That seemed appropriate. Anyone else have any questions? Again, I can't see. You might have to speak up because I can't see.
Donna, if you want to turn your screen off here. There you go.
Hey, we're back. Chris, did you have any questions? No? Okay. And for those of you that are new to this, again, it's a lot of information. There's some concepts that may be foreign to you. I know mostly I appreciate the examples that are real life and kind of like on, home or boat or whatever. But it's not at all out of the ordinary for anyone who's new to want to make a request to meet with Donna personally, or by phone or by Zoom, to ask questions that you may not feel comfortable asking or to come up during the week. That's absolutely normal. Again, it's a process. One of the great things about being on the council, being the mayor here at Merriam, is we have excellent professionals that are well-trained, certified in what they do to give us advice on things like the budget. So, there's a comfort factor I have. I go to meetings where I have mayors where they don't have a staff. They have maybe a city clerk and no finance directors, and they have to do it all themselves. Really, that would be a scary process because it's pretty complicated when you look at all the things that we do in all these different funds. But it all works out. So I would certainly invite you to reach out if you need to. Chris, did you have a comment? Chris Evans? Yeah.
Yes, if you wait long enough, I'll ask something. I would like to be sure that everybody gets a copy of this presentation, because for those people who are new, it is a lot of information.
Just taking screenshots like crazy.
Yeah, we will definitely share that. I wrote that down during the presentation. Yeah, we will share it, and we will. I believe we plan on trying to have something out prior to next Monday's meeting if we can put those together. Now, if that's digital or if that's something we deliver to your house, I'm not sure, but we're going to try to have something out so you can digest it a little bit before we get to the meeting.
And then speaking of digesting, since we start at 6:30, are you going to have some sandwiches delivered to our houses so we can all eat together?
I will eat a sandwich while Donna talks and presents the budget. You can listen to me chew.
Awesome.
We do. We know we have to have really, really good cookies next year because I know that we're missing out on the cookies this year. I mean, that's usually the highlight of the budget is the cookies.
Yeah, I will say if you come to the flag raising ceremony, we are going to have special Merriam cookies.
Oh, goody.
And if you're not able to make it, let me know and I will save you a special cookie.
Are we going to be able to eat them under our Merriam mask?
No, no, that's why they're packaged, so you can take them with you.
All right, well, unless, Mr. Engel, if you have anything further, or I guess we can wrap this thing up.
Yep. No, I appreciate everybody working with us on the accelerated timeline, all Donna and the department heads' hard work just to get us to this point. We look forward to sharing the 21 budget with you next week. Again, I think it's a good sound budget that takes into account the world that we're living in, but also some of the good fortune that we have in our community. So thank you. Please feel free to reach out to any of us this week or next week.
All right. Well, good night, everyone, and we'll see you the next time we meet.
Thank you.
See y'all.